Welcome back, Raw Thoughts listeners, to another episode with me, Mackenzie Tiggs. Today, I am so happy to have Jessica Flores on with us. It's going to be super awesome just talking with another fellow first responder and female at that. So, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. And guys, if I clear my throat, sorry. I've got a sore throat and earache, so fun times.
Yes. Thank you so much for doing that, even when you're not feeling the best. So, I want to deep dive into what your background has been in law enforcement, how you got into it, and kind of what also got you out of it.
Yeah, so I will make it the short version. At 21 years old, I started in law enforcement. That's the youngest you can be. I actually applied when I was 20, and within a month, I was hired and on the road in Kansas City, Missouri, which is not a small city. I mean, maybe to where some people are from, it's small, but it is a very violent city for as small as it is. And I came from a town where I graduated with like 41 people. So it was quite the culture shock. I did a couple years of college in the city so I could get a feel for it because I knew that's where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. But still, when you're out there on the road actually dealing with people's problems and you're like, wow, I don't get this kind of life at all, it really creates a different perspective in your mind of, wow, I've got to get in the heads and the minds of these people and understand them a little bit better so that I can better serve them. It's not just what you see on TV and it's not just tossing people around. It's not just taking people to jail. It's so much more than that. We had to wear 8 to 10, 12 different hats when we're out there. You're a parent, a social worker, a counselor, you're all the different things. And at 21 years old, I'm just needing to figure all that out for myself. So it was a very quick, like, throw into reality, throw into life, but I wouldn't change it for the world. 4 years into it, right around 4 years, the burnout really started to hit. I had stayed on midnights that entire time. I was in the worst part of the city that entire time. I had gotten shot at on Halloween of '09, so just 3 years, right around 3 years in. And while I knew that could happen, it didn't really become a reality until it happened to me. We had several officers shot, and it was just like, okay, part of the job. Let's move on. Let's pick up. Let's go back to work. Um, but when it happened, and I was like trying to picture my family getting that phone call that I was no longer there. Like I heard them go by my head, so they were close. Like they were right there, and I just was like, wow, that really sucks. And these people really aren't worth it to me. And that's maybe a really shitty viewpoint. Is cussing aloud? Sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good.
You're good.
So it was just really like, they're not worth it to me. This is not, I'm not changing the world that I thought I was when I came into this. I had really let all the outside parts of the job, not the job itself, but the politics and the prosecutor and the midnights and the bad people we were dealing with versus the very seldom and very few good people we were getting to deal with. I just saw no way to change the environment I was in. I was young. I was 24, 25 years old. And I said, you know what? I think I'm done. There's got to be more to life than this. I can save it in another way. So I thought, well, nursing makes sense, but let me get my CNA license first and just see if I even want to be in a hospital. Can I really deal with the things that nurses deal with? Instead of spending all that money and figuring out, no, you can't. So I did that. I hated every minute of it. The training in a nursing home was absolutely heartbreaking. And mind you, I didn't have a heart, I felt like, for 4 years. Like, that's just how I felt like I had to survive the street. I disassociated everything and nothing got to me. I was like a robot. And so then you're at a nursing home and you're like, oh, these people have no family that want to come visit, or wow, all the things. And then I got put in a hospital finally and I was like, yes. But did I get the ER where I thought I would thrive? No, I got the oncology floor. Talk about even more heartbreaking. People are coming into the hospital with a headache or a stomach ache, and now they've got cancer and they're actually dying on this floor in front of me, and they've got like 2 weeks to live. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can't. I'm not built for this. You really got attached to those people because obviously you took care of them more than a 20-minute call throughout your shift. So that was really hard, and I was like, the first time I got hit and kicked by a patient, I couldn't do anything back. I was like, this is just not it. This is not for me. I need to be able to defend myself. And I just felt the call in my heart that you were meant to be a cop. I had felt that since a very young age. And so let me put in for this other department, completely surrounded by Kansas City, a very tiny city of like 9 square miles. Put in for that, got that. And I let it be known right away. I was like, I'm not here for patrol duties, just FYI. I am here to be a detective. Like, that is my goal. And that was really the only goal I had ever set for my entire career, was be a detective. specifically a homicide detective. I love crimes against people because I wanted to be able to give them a voice that they didn't have or they felt they didn't have. So I always took those to heart. And so about a year and a half in, I got detective. And about a year after that, and hundreds of cases in my caseload, I really saw the need for some leadership. And I had never been one to think, oh, I want any type of rank. I had never thought that. I had never wanted that. I knew that I could lead from where I was. I could be a leader in the position I was in. But something just kept saying, put in, put in, put in. Well, I put in and I ended up getting it. And I don't want to say I was shocked, but I also don't want to sound cocky. I was very proud that I got that role.
Mhm.
It was the role my grandpa retired at back in '95, kind of my inspiration for being a cop. And about a year into that, a nagging wrist injury made me have surgery. I was told 3 months I would be back to new. 3 months came and gone, 6 months came and went. I still was not good as new. And I just, to this day, 7 years later, I had surgery in 2016. I can't do push ups like I should be able to. I can't pull things like I should be able to. I can't use my hand, and it was my dominant hand, of course, like I should be able to. And back then, it wasn't the climate it is now, but it was starting to go that way. It was starting to swing to a more violent. And for a year and a half, I had dealt with wearing a brace on my hand and ripping it off on the way to a call so I wouldn't be seen as a weakness and still doing my job, but I paid for it for like a week after that because I just couldn't handle it. So November of 16 is when my now husband was moving states to go to another department. I was going with them. And I was like, I guess that's just one more nail in the coffin. That's what it felt like at the time of my career.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack.
It
I mean,
is.
there are so many levels which I love to be able to unpack these things because um I think it's some of the things that you've said is like, oh, that's not for me. And so many people don't realize that until they're so far into a career
Yeah.
and they're like, oh wow, actually this is not for me. And, even just being from a CNA, standpoint and I don't think people understand like how much death nurses, CNAs, like nursing facilities, hospitals see on the daily basis.
And it's
Like,
not normal. Like, it is not normal for a human to have to see that many times.
and I think the part that people that are not in this, servant field is like, oh, well, like they're not your family though. And it's like, no, but you're expecting me to care for them. And if you're expecting me to like build this relationship with them, that means that I'm getting to know them.
Yeah.
And then now you're taking that away. And so it's like, why would you get close?
Yeah.
Why would you get close with your patients? And why would you get close with anybody in life? Because that's all you see.
Yep.
And there's such a bitterness that comes with that. And I think that's one of, I'm going to say, the hard struggles is like, how do we deal with that?
Yeah. And that was one of the things when I was still at that first apartment at Kansas City. I told you I disassociated so much I was literally a robot. So it seemed like I didn't care. And honestly, there came a point when I decided to leave that I didn't even recognize who I was anymore because I just didn't care. The empathy that I had had my entire life was gone. I didn't care who you were, what you were doing. If you did something wrong, this is how you're going to get treated. And if you're going to act like an animal, I was going to treat you like an animal. And it's wrong and it's shameful looking back, but it's where I was. And I think it's where a lot of people get to in their career, especially out there doing the same thing. Didn't I just put you in jail last night? Oh, you did? But the prosecutor, it's just one after another. And then, oh, you think you have the balls to shoot at me? Okay, well, it's hard. And people, I don't think, talk about it nearly enough. We talk about the cool arrest or the foot chase, the car chase, all the fun things, but not the other side.
And I think it's very difficult to talk about those other things because so much of it is out of our control. There's so much, like you said, you take them to jail and then now the next day they're out and then now you're back in for the same problems. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, you did what your job is supposed to be doing, but yet, our politicians, our prosecutors, our judicial system is not supporting what they're actually doing and trying to make that difference
Yeah.
because like in our area a lot of times people are getting let out on minor crimes because we don't have enough facility space for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, cool, so we're just okay with letting criminals be out on the streets because we don't have enough facility room for them. Like, let's start looking at the
Yeah.
problems. But I think they don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't think they truly want to see what the problems are.
Well, and it's one of those, then it becomes an us versus them situation, those of us out on the street and then those of them who are letting them out. And that's not good for anybody. That's not good for our system, whether it's the civilians or the citizens we're serving or the justice system in general. It's just not good. The us versus them is never the answer to anything in life, guys. Just please hear me if I say nothing else. That is not the way that we move forward in this country. But when you're doing things like this and when you're on patrol and you're surrounded by patrol, I can go into work and be like, it is my job to arrest people. That is it. It is my job to arrest them and get them off the street. It doesn't matter what happened. But when you're doing it again the next night or they get out and they hurt somebody, you take it personal, even though you know it's not yours. And there are definitely not enough services or offers out there to check in on you and be like, are you okay? Like, that's not a thing. You're weak if you get help,
Mhm,
basically. And
mhm.
I feel that stigma is starting to change. I'm not in it anymore, but as I'm watching people who are in it, wellness programs are starting to be a thing. Debriefs of critical incidents are starting to be a thing. People are willing to call each other on these things, and I think that's so necessary.
I would definitely agree with you. I just have been reflecting on my career as well and being in it for over a decade. I'm like, holy cow! Like, I definitely you can definitely see things, changing, but at what pace are we still behind? And playing this catch up,
Mhm.
effect. I want to also deep dive into being a female officer. Like, what other aspects in your career did you have to combat being the female?
I love this question because I really do feel like I'm not the typical answer for this, I guess. And me going into law enforcement, I was this teeny tiny tot. Like when I say like 115 pounds, like barely there, like you could flick me, that was me. And so I got a lot of, you can't do that before I even got in it. And I loved it because it just gave fuel to the fire. I was like, watch me. So I did. I went through the academy, 15 pounds of solid muscle gain, still only 130 pounds when you're dealing with people out there that are far bigger. But I was really confident in my ability to take care of business and understand I can't do everything the guys can do. I was more than welcome to say, like, I know I can't do X, Y,
Mhm.
or Z, or that somebody out here might actually beat my ass one day. Like, that might happen. And I think having that perception and that reality in my brain already helped a lot. Obviously, when you're a new officer, you're already having to prove yourself to the senior people, anyways. Obviously, being a female, a small female on top of that, you had to at least show that you could get down if you needed to, or that you weren't gonna turn into super bitch when somebody like talked back to you. So that was a balance, and I really, especially while I was in it, I never saw anything but brothers and sisters out there. Like I didn't see anybody as anything else. I didn't feel like I was treated any differently. I feel like toward the end there was one person who was a sergeant. He was just pissed off that he lost his cush job in a cave somewhere because they eliminated a position, and he was just coming at me with everything and right up, right. I'm like, 4 years I've been here and never had an issue, and you're the one, I won't cuss that bad, but you're the one person that is gonna try some shit? No, I don't think so. Like I do my job and I do it very freaking well. So I really never felt like additional pressure. Looking back, I can't even say that it was because I was a female. I think it's law enforcement in general with this. I was an idealist, and that's definitely not welcome on police department. This is the way it is, and this is how we're gonna do things. You're gonna shut up, you're gonna come to work, you're gonna do your job, and I'm of rank, so I'm going to be the one to decide things. Even if you had the best idea and it was going to help so many people, nope, unless it's my idea, we're not doing it. And oh, okay. And then I didn't even see it as that. I was like, okay, being 7 years removed, I'm like, yeah, no, that environment is really like we're just pushing people down and not letting them be who they are and lean into the gifts that they actually have. And like, oh, Jessica's really good at this. Let's let her do more of this type of work or vice versa. But I don't ever really feel like I was discriminated against for being a female in any way, shape, or form. Again, I think that was more internal. I have to prove myself to these guys. Plus, I was new too, so I didn't even look at it as a female since I didn't look at things that way. I didn't take it that way. But I mean, I had to fight alone a couple times and prove that I could handle it.
Yeah.
But
What
I
about
mean,
to
it
the
made me who I
public?
am. So
Yeah, for sure. It does make you who you are. What about to the public? Because I think there are two different aspects. I think
yeah,
within the department, that's one thing, but then also out in the community is a different aspect as well.
So you took it very differently from the community. You took some of the, especially as a young 20 freaking 1 year old, of course, the young dudes who you're trying to deal with and arrest are going to be stupid and say really dumb things or whatever, or make jokes. The older people, I remember I would walk into Quick Trip to get a drink and be like, "Are you even old enough to carry that gun?" I'm like, "No, it's fake. It's a dress up Halloween costume." Like, don't say things like that. But females were probably my hardest to deal with. They're kind of psycho. No offense, ladies, but when they are drugged out and strung out, they are freakishly strong and they are really freaking hateful. It was more so them that I had issues with in the street than I did a male ever, and the
Yeah.
ones who would fight first versus a male.
Yes. Females definitely they're feisty.
Let's try
I
to
mean, and
establish
I
dominance. I'm like, no, we're not. It's me.
I mean, even on the medical side, like the females that I've remembered from calls, I'm like, they're like, and listen, like I know I'm feisty and I can only imagine what I'm gonna be like an old lady, but like they're they're mean. Like
They're mean.
they can be very, very, very just I would say cowardly to people.
With what they
And
say, with the spitting on people, which is my least favorite. You try to spit on me, your face is going into the ground. We're not doing that. Until we get a spit hood on you, we're not playing that game.
yeah, yeah. So what has been your transition out of the career? You know, with this injury, you think that this is going to be your career for the rest of your life. That's what you kind of had, established, you had been working towards, I would say goal oriented. I was kind of that same way where it's like, oh, well, I'll just show up to work and like, this is what I'm going to be.
Yeah.
Where is that transition came from?
It's been a shit show, that's for sure. It took a while to get through. I would say the first 2 years, embarrassingly enough, the first 2 years were very much like a depressive state. I refused to accept that it was over. I was only 31 years old when I lost my career. And so, again, I only had 10 years on the road. And I just was like, there is no freaking way this is over. And then I was applying for like civilian jobs at police departments, but not getting them when we moved. I had applied for so many jobs that seemed like a good transition out of law enforcement. And I wasn't even getting an interview and I wasn't getting to talk to people. And I was like, what in the. I was a sergeant by the time I was 29 years old and I was in charge of keeping people alive all night long. Like, how is there no value here? And I started watching some people on social media. They were living the lives that I wanted to live. And I was like, what is wrong with me? So after 2 years, finally, my dad's health starting to deteriorate, my own health kind of going, ooh, what are you doing? Please get off the freaking couch and do something. I was like, I've got to take control of this. If I don't see my own value and my own worth, they're certainly not going to see it and give me a job. So while I got jobs that whole time, they were just very purposeless. They meant nothing at all to me. It's a job and it paid my bills. So, and it was more than disability income. So, or for the like short-term, long-term stuff. So I took a few of those jobs. And then when I started seeing these people and it was with a direct sales company and they did this workout program and I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. That's what I want to look like. That's what I need to mentally do. Like the things they were saying about this program and how it changed them. I was like, it really sounds like what I need. Did it. 90 days later, I was a completely different person. Mind you, 2 years of sitting in that depressive state. And then all of a sudden, 90 days later, I'm this totally different person mentally and physically. I'm like, holy shit. And I was proud of myself for the first time in those 2 years. And I was like, wow, like I bawled my eyes out when I finished the program. I couldn't even believe like that I looked like that and that I pushed myself and my wrist through those types of workouts. It was the first time I'd been able to use it. Because for 2 years I was like, I can't work out because my wrist. Like so lame, so lame. You've got an entire body that can move and you're using one body part that you do use quite a bit, but you're using it as an excuse. And so the minute I got rid of those excuses is really when my transition really started for me. So about 5 years ago. And it's kind of, it's done this. I still held a lot of purposeless jobs, but each and every one taught me something new about myself and even more so like what I don't want. Oh, okay, I don't want to work with manufacturing. I don't want to work in supply chain things. I don't want to be in operations. I am a people person. I want to help people. That's what I've always done since I became a cop, obviously, but I want to help people who want help. I am done helping people or trying to help people who don't want help. And so while I still have purposeless jobs, I have built my own business on the side and am building it to this day. It's still very new, but I've at least started it and we are moving on.
That's awesome. That's super awesome. And I love what you said about helping people that actually want help, because so many of the people that we encounter on a daily basis as first responders is they don't want help.
No.
They're in the victim, mindset. They're almost getting forced
Yeah.
to be told what's occurring, what's happening, what their next move is,
Yeah.
and they don't have accountability. And so the fact of like wanting to help people that actually want help is such an incredible statement, because that is a niche within itself.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And sometimes they don't know that they need that help, but they're searching for something.
Yeah.
And that's really rewarding to see that you're being able to take your own values and your own, dedication and uniqueness, and craft that into something other than the police work.
Yeah, for sure. Getting to serve those I once served alongside has been the greatest honor. Like law enforcement, of course, was great. I had a ton of great there, but I've noticed there's a whole lot better out there since getting out, and I just had to take the time to embrace it.
Yeah. What has that journey looked like? A lot of people talk about doing the work. You did that 90-day challenge,
Mhm.
but then there's also still the day to day that has to occur
Mhm.
after those 90 days. Like what was it that really helped you decide, like, this is my uniqueness, I'm embracing this, and this is where I'm going forward with it?
Community and surrounding myself with like-minded people who had similar goals, obviously not the same, but similar goals, who would push each other and pull things out of me that I didn't even know I had. Like I said, the creativity part, I never saw myself as creative because obviously in the police department it was just shoved down like nope, nope, nope. And so you're like, oh, my ideas are bad or this or that, and I always took creative as art or music, things like that, the traditional sense. And I am somebody, I guess, that really needs to see somebody else say something in a different way in order for my brain to pick it up and be like, oh. So the second that I realized ideas were my creativity, and then being able to put them down into building courses or learning how to podcast in a day or doing Canva and making graphics and things like that, I was like, oh my God, I'm a totally different person like than I thought I was. And people are actually asking me to do these things. I hate public speaking, yet here I am on a podcast video. People will ask me to do trainings for their teams in the direct sales world. And I'm like, okay, sure, I'm scared shitless, but I'm going to do it. And that mindset work is all things that first 90 days of that program really instilled in me. The personal development, you had to read 15 to 20 pages a day. I was like, I'm good. I don't need that. Turns out we do. We really do need that. The community, every day you had an accountability group. You got your workout done, you posted a picture, everybody's like, yes, da da da. Or, man, I'm really feeling shitty today. Or, here's a mom with 3 little babies at home and a broken foot and she's working out. Like, okay, I guess I will go work out when there's nothing wrong with me and I have no kids. Like, okay, so the accountability piece, but there were so many pieces of that journey that just instilling those habits. I think they say 21 days to form one and 90 days for a lifestyle. I still work out every day. I still cheers you with my pre-workout before I work out every day. I still do the things that I did then because it's just who I am now. And I know that it can help. It helped me so much that it can help anybody else.
That's awesome. That's really cool. It's so crazy because people, with reading, they're like, oh, like, I haven't read for so long. Or I literally picked up a new book yesterday at Barnes and Noble, and one of the girls was like, personal development, that's dumb, I don't even like that. And I was like, girl, I think you need
You
some.
need this.
Like,
I'll buy you a copy.
like, right. Well, I'm gonna be like, just like come hither, let me help you out. Because yes, if you're saying that,
Yeah.
you need some.
And that was a big lesson. I feel like every time I'm like, oh, I don't need that, that is the thing that I actually need.
Yeah.
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 Slapping the
It's like that resistance, and that's the thing that is what will actually help level you up in the next, kind of category of your life. Is you don't want to do it, that's probably what you need to be doing.
Yes, the getting comfortable being uncomfortable that everybody overuses and everybody says, but it is facts. If you are comfortable, you are not going to be who you're supposed to be.
Yeah. And what's very interesting to me is like, you know, it's very courageous, the types of work that a police officer and a first responder does so effortlessly. And I think it can be overlooked drastically by a lot of people. And yet they do something in their personal life and they're like, no, I can't do that. And I'm like, you literally walk through houses
Yeah.
that you don't know who's in there and you have a gun drawn. Like, what the hell do you mean you can't get on social media and live for 5 minutes?
It is
Like,
so funny. I've had this conversation with wives of officers that I've interviewed for my podcast, and then myself. I'm like, there is no real fear out here. I mean, there is, but like doing this kind of thing, literally nobody's gonna die. Nobody is dying at the end of this. So like just put yourself out there. It's our ego that is gonna be bruised. It's not any real danger. It's our ego is in danger and there's like red flags going off. But yes, we can search buildings, we can get shot, we can do all the things, but the minute you're like taking us out of that realm, we freeze and we're like, oh my gosh. And I've had this realization with my new job. So I work as a civilian at our local PD plus my own business. And I'm like, somebody said something about who I am. I'm like, you're only seeing like work, Jess. When I am here, when I am in an authoritative role in the police department, yes, I act a different way. That is like who I am to my core. It's when you get me outside of work and I'm allowed to actually have that empathy again, to be that person. It's a whole lot easier over here to do that and just be vulnerable and let myself be seen. But over here, no. I expect a certain person to be in this role, and that's how I'm going to show up. So it's been very hard to balance, and it feels like an identity crisis every day.
that's what I was just going to ask you is like, to me, that almost sounds like you just described like having a mask on
Hmm.
in the work field versus that vulnerability piece outside of it. Like, how is it that you don't feel like you could mesh both of those?
So it's interesting. And like I said, for 7 years, I feel like I ran from the law enforcement world as much as I could. So it was a blessing that I didn't get any of those somewhat transferable jobs initially. It made me get out of my comfort zone. It made me prove to myself that I could do whatever I wanted to do out here. And then going back, I've only been there just under a year now. But being back, and it's not saying anything bad about the department, it is just still a toxic culture. It is still like, I felt like I had so much freedom for 7 years. Because when you're in the department, you are definitely bound by, you can't talk about anything political. You can't make statements about your prosecutor. You can't do a whole lot of things that for 7 years I've been able to do. So we're back in it. And it is very, very difficult. It is not something I recommend to anybody. But people who are leaving and then immediately going into it, maybe it's easier because you're just accepting it. But I'm here to be that voice and I'm here to show you that there is life after law enforcement, that getting away from it, even if it's just a brief time, and proving to yourself you can do whatever, or how big the world is out here and all the opportunities, that you don't have to settle for that type of environment. I mean, I need a job and I got to pay my bills. So I'm there and I'm working on building it. But I come home and I'm just like normal, vulnerable Jess, and I'll get on here and do whatever. It's just for those 8 hours a day. I have to have a mask on there more than I do out here for sure.
Yeah. That brings up a good discussion point of, the toxicity within these agencies, because there is a lot that, you're not allowed to talk about. You're not allowed to bring up. You're not allowed to share your opinions. And I think that is why there is so much identity crisis, is because there is so much internal fight
Mm-hmm.
between what the department is doing, not having another perspective. And instead of having a collaboration about
Mm-hmm.
things, we just get into arguments with that.
Yes.
And, my worry is that the environment and the culture is going to stay the same, and we're not going to have anybody become law enforcement. We're not going to have anybody come in and actually be able to protect our communities. And so therefore we need to be restructuring and r- basically building a new culture within our first responders. And I say this because EMS is a big part of obviously me and doing that. And it's difficult and it's going to take a long time, and there's a lot of resistance at the beginning of this, but I just fear that if people continue to do that, then we aren't going to have anybody protecting our streets.
Yeah, and one
We
thing
aren't going to
yeah, one thing I've noticed, and again, not bashing anybody, it is part of the culture, it is part of who these people are and the generations that were brought up in this culture, but there's a whole like level that once they're retired and gone, it's going to open up a doorway for the people who are a little bit more like you and I, who are a little more open to, oh, we really do need these wellness programs. Not the, I'm done with this wellness bullshit. This is just silly. And this is not how it was when I, no, it's not how it was when you started. It's not how it was 7 years ago when I got out, and definitely not 17 years ago when I started. It is a completely different world and culture. And just because it's always been done this way does not mean that's how it needs to be done. I've had plenty of conversations on LinkedIn about like, when does this kind of work need to start? The academy. That is where it needs to start. And if I am supposed to be the one that falls on that sword and takes on academies, then I will do it. But yes, you have got to teach officers from the very start mental health for themselves and for each other, not just other people. I am glad that since I've gotten out, they now teach crisis intervention to academy people in some academies. Okay, but that's still taking care of them out there, us. And what signs do we need to recognize? It needs to be a culturally competent training for law enforcement. Hey, if you notice this sign, hey, if you start doing this, hey, if your buddy starts doing this, then you need to say X, Y, or Z and be brave enough to have that freaking conversation, because a lot of us aren't. Well, it's not my business, or I've got my own problems to worry about. Well, no, because if that person does end up committing suicide, which is an epidemic in our fields, I don't want that on my hands. If I saw something, I'm going to say something. And that's just the direct part of me.
Yeah. No, and I definitely agree, on that. And it's pretty interesting because I had actually reached out to our post and they're like, yeah, we won't accept you because you're not a police officer. And I was like, cool. So you're already like putting that barrier between us, saying that like, yes, we're not the same, but like what we do as first responders and how we react about this is very, very similar.
Yeah.
Our threats are different, but we work hand in hand in this career. And yet, right. And it's like, you're already giving me, and that gives me fuel, because I'm like, oh, you don't want me? I'm gonna push even harder. Like, we're gonna go stronger. Like, you don't want to hear this redhead girl. Come on. Like, we're getting louder. Like,
Yes,
that's what's gonna
love
happen,
it.
is like, we're not stopping here, because it's so much of the older generation, and this is in life.
Yes.
This is not just
Yeah.
this is not just first responders. I see it in the corporate world. I see it in real estate that I sell. I see it is a generational, doesn't matter what career you're
In our
in.
own families,
There
you see it.
Yeah, we're like, well, we don't normally do that. And I'm like, cool. Do you want the same
Right.
results?
Yeah.
Do you want the same things for the next generation because you're doing the same? I don't.
Yep.
So that means we do something different. Is it going to be better? I don't know. I want your input. I want your experience. I want your knowledge and your wisdom of your years to help me with this. I'm not saying I know it. I'm not saying that I can do it better than you. I'm saying something's wrong and I need more input.
Yep. And I am proud to be the one that takes that first step of like, okay, we got to change something. I don't know really what, but we're going to try something. We're going to throw some spaghetti at the wall and see what actually works, because we've got to have something better out there. It's got to be better than it is. And the minute you start thinking about that anywhere in life, there is probably something better out there. And it's up to you to maybe find that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, that you had just said that too, is that you have to find that. Like, even within those 2 years, it was Jess that had to find that program, right? It was the individual, and this goes down to any individual as well, is like, I don't have the answers for you. I'm just trying to provide. I'm trying to provide people's experiences and what they've done through this podcast and throughout the, literally, I can say now, world of the listeners and people that have been on this podcast and I've been able to coach and teach, is like, I don't have the perfect answers. You have to have that mindset that you want to figure it out. You have to have that mindset and the willingness and accountability to want to change. Nobody else can do that for
I
you.
cannot do the work for you. I can give you every tool, and if you choose not to do it, I can lead you to water, as they say with horses. It's up to you to drink it. If you're not ready, you're not ready.
Absolutely. So with this transition in, still working for the agency and then now, kind of coaching, where has that led you?
Oh, on such a roller coaster. I would say I think it was I don't even know what year we're in right now. 2023. 2022, I would say March of 22. I was super unhappy in the last job I had and I was like there has got to be more and why can't I figure this out? And I had actually made friends with a client. It was a security alarm company who was like 75 years old. Bless her heart. She was the cutest thing. So we went to lunch and stuff together. We became friends. And I was telling her this, and she was like, "How's it going at work?" I'm like, "Still miserable. People are telling me I should do this life coaching thing, and I don't even like what is that, and who would I coach?" And direct sales had been telling me for 5 years, "You got to have a niche, and you've got to have a niche, or you're talking to too many people." I'm like, "Who do I even talk to?" And she told me about a CEO transition coach that she knew, and I was like, "What is a CEO transition coach?" And as soon as she said the words, they help transition CEOs out of that role to live at home and not be in charge anymore. I literally was like, okay, stop talking for a second. I need my phone. And I was like, I can help ex cops. I can help ex cops who have transitioned out of the field. At the time, it was due to injury. Like they lost their career due to injury. We got a ton of life left to live and a whole lot of career we should have, but we don't. So I can help them through that. And then I was like, but do I help females do that? I'm like, no, for God's sakes, who cares what sex they are or what they identify as? If you're in this role and you are going through this transition, it's going to beat you over the head. Unless you retire, maybe. And so I immediately went home. I got to work on creating like a form with all these questions that I could send to every ex cop I knew. Several of them filled it out. A lot were retired. And as much as I love their input, it really did reinvigorate that, yeah, I don't want to help those people necessarily. They're not my ideal client, if you will. Could I still help them? Yes. But they had an entire career that they got to live through and all the experiences. They got all of the resources to, hey, as you're leading up to retirement, here's what this looks like. When it is just ripped out from under you, I will tell you, I have never felt so alone in my entire life and nobody got it. My department, just FYI, guys, you're a number to your department. They didn't care. They didn't check on me once after I was gone. It was turn in your things, see you later. I didn't even get like a memorabilia piece from my career to keep with me after all the hard work I had done. And I was like, what the fuck? Okay, fine. And all of that made it harder. And so you've got some friends on the department, and maybe initially they check in, but then it's like, well, we all have our own lives, and then gone. And if they have not been through this transition, even my husband, who's a current officer, he hasn't been through the transition. Like, he has no idea what it's actually like to face the worthlessness and the hopelessness of being able to get something else that brings purpose. And I mean, it that took last year, so 6 years to find something that had a purpose in my life again. And I felt so freaking passionate and like, oh my God, I get to be a voice for officers who are working because there's so many trying to leave. I get to be that voice for them. I get to be the voice of what's on the other side. I get to say the things going on in their departments that are making them want to leave. I get to say that. I get to talk about that. I get to be that person and give a different perspective. And I just know that if I don't show up, other people are suffering out there, and I cannot, in good conscience, let that happen.
Yeah. You bring up a good point, and something that's like really been weighing heavy on my heart recently is like the lack of support to first responders versus the military. Like military can go out, have their 4 years. Now they have the VA, that these benefits, they have, these a lot of memorabilia, all of these things. But yet first responders don't have that. Like you are just a number. You are just, oh, cool. Like you're injured, you can't work. We need somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think that brings so much difficulty to it as well, because it's not like you can go start your own business and have it deemed first responder owned, like veteran owned. There's not, a thought came to my mind the other day. I'm like, being a veteran is like freaking buying the, you know, blue check mark for your Instagram. Like, oh, pay $14.99 a month and now you're certified to be a veteran. But yet you haven't done the actual hard work of being shot at. I mean, the majority of the people that have been in the military have not even seen war. Yet we have people like you that are literally getting shot at, that are not able to do their jobs anymore and getting that taken away. and yet we have no resources for them.
And not to diminish anything the military does for us, because they do plenty, and bless them all for serving, because I don't want to. But yes, and that was something that I noticed. And it does look like they're starting to try to at least be more resources out there. But when I was looking at starting Next Shift, which is my company, I tried to look up like books, and they're all written by ex-military people who maybe went to police world and were like commanders. But there were just very few. There weren't any. I couldn't find resources to even build a resource guide for people. And I even had somebody ask me, well, what is your, I don't even know the word he used, but how dare I think I can help them? And again, that's them. I've done enough
Mm,
personal growth that's their like limiting beliefs,
that's a
not
critic in your
mine.
life. Yep.
I just snapped right back and was like, I fucking lived it. So that's how I can help them. I don't have all the answers. I don't claim to have all of the answers. My job is actually to empower you to find the answers for yourself within you. Because what was for me, or what worked for me, isn't going to work for everybody. I just get to help you maybe think about something a little bit differently than you are. And somebody did a podcast review the other day, and it was so nice to, because I hadn't thought about it, about it was great to hear a perspective of someone who didn't retire or who wasn't a commander level, or and plenty of people have sent messages like that. I'm like, that is just proof that I am on to something here. Like, everybody out there is writing books and doing these things because they got to retire and have a full career to lean back on. I got 10 freaking years from one that was supposed to be 30. And I've just really had to reinvent myself from there. And my goal is to help these officers just, and eventually all first responders, but remember who you are behind that badge. Do that today. You don't have to wait till you start transitioning to remember who the hell you are as a person. Now, I'll get to help you like rediscover your identity, because far too many of us lose it in that role. It's a thing that happens. I get to help you redefine your purpose, because what you started with and what you're at now that you're facing not having it, it's different. It's going to be a different purpose, and that's okay. We have to accept that. And then get you back to reigniting your passions. What did you love to do? And you were like, well, I can't because I'm sleeping all day and I'm working all night type of thing. Or the job just took all the joy out of my life and I didn't want to go out and do the things that bring me joy. Or I can't let that happen because I got to stay tough and go back to the... It's all bullshit reasons, but they're reasons that we use, and it's my job then to help you remember that. So when this transition happens, for whatever reason, you're farther ahead than I was.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that's, it's so powerful to take that pain that you have endured and put that to your own passion, and very similar in the ways where I was like, I don't even want to claim that I was a first responder. I was just like, so much bitterness,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you have to let those things go. You also have to accept that that is part of you and that's part of your own story. And, like you said, reinventing yourself. It's like, holy shit. Like, when you look back at like who you are as a person at your core and your core values, like with or without the badge, with or without the title, that's who you should be.
Yeah. Yep. And I love when I do like a Transformation Tuesday post from who I am now to where I was then. And they get a lot of traction, and people, the goal of those posts is to make people look at themselves. Who was I when I got in this or when I left this, and who am I now? What's the difference? Are you proud of that difference? Because if you're not, you better freaking get to work, and I'm available. So
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
point of those posts. It's not to say, oh, look at this. It is literally, I hope you're taking the time to think about what is written here and how it applies to you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. What advice would you have to somebody getting into the career?
Whew. Keep a circle outside of law enforcement. Do not let it consume you. Do not. That was a thing at my first department. I lived it. I lived with a cop. I breathed it. I went to work. We went out with our sector mates. We talked about work while we were out. There was just no escape from it. And at the time, it was okay. It was great until it wasn't. And then you're like, okay, this is a problem. So when I went to my next department, I was like, I'm not being friends with anybody. I will be work related with you, but I'm not hanging out with you. And honestly, when I got promoted to sergeant, that was very helpful because I didn't have to worry about people being but we were friends. No, I've been your coworker and now I'm your boss. Like,
Yeah.
that's how it is.
Yeah. It's a very dynamic career, to say the
It's a
least.
lot. Yeah, it is a lot of things. A very purposeful career, 1000%. I will never take. I'm still very proud to say that I worked at this department and that I was this rank. I am still very proud to say those things, but that is not who I am at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's because that does not consume what your identity
Yep.
is. And that's exactly why you can say, yeah, I did that. I accomplished that. I'm proud of that. But look at what else I can also do.
Yep.
Instead of think, oh, well, I used to be this, or I used to do that, or I used to this. And it's like, right, but who are you now?
Right.
And who are you becoming? And that those parts get very miscued and a lot of darkness around that you can't see.
Stay tuned for this week's episode of my podcast where I ask you to define the who, what, where, when, why, and how of yourself and really dig deep into who you are.
It's a fun process, I will tell you.
It can
I
be a
love
painful
doing
one
it.
too, but it's worth it 100%.
It definitely can be painful and you know, I find myself very guilty of like sometimes doing so much personal work. Like recently I'm like, oh, I have a ratio of read one page and write 4 of my own. And I was like, that's why it takes me forever to read.
Yep.
Which is so fun. But well, Jessica, how can people be able to find you?
All right. So I am on both Instagram and LinkedIn. LinkedIn is just Jessica Reed. I don't know why it has my maiden name, but Flores. Instagram, _Jess Flores, or I think it's _ next shift _ on Instagram. You got to love the underscores just to make your damn name happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listeners, I will have all of her contact information also in the show notes. I appreciate it so much coming on, getting to discuss a little bit more about you and what you're doing and helping our first responders. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Listeners, I will talk to you next week for another episode. Thank you again for listening to another episode of Raw Thoughts Podcast. I'd appreciate it if you could follow, like, subscribe, and share with anybody that you think would be interested in this. You can also head over to my website at rawthoughtspodcast.com and see any other guests that have been on the episodes. You could also go over to Instagram and follow at rawthoughts.podcast. I would really appreciate it, and always send me a message if you're interested in being a guest or any feedback.